Now, what about those patients now with negative neurodynamic tests? Now, we know that up to 58% of patients with lumbar radiculopathy have a completely normal straight leg raise. And also, it has been reported that up to 72% of patients with carpal tunnel syndrome have completely normal upper limb neurodynamic tests. So the question arises why that is, because commonly as physiotherapists, we interpret a neurodynamic test as a suggestion of nerve involvement. And these patients had a clear diagnosis of nerve involvement, for example, with electrodiagnostic tests. Now, in order to kind of find out what is going on, we did the following study. We took patients with carpal tunnel syndrome. They were subgrouped into those with positive and those with negative upper limb neurodynamic tests. And we also had a healthy control group. And what we did is we used standardized quantitative sensory testing, evaluating the large as well as the small fiber population with different thermal and mechanical stimuli. And we were wondering whether there's a difference in nerve fiber function of these different fibers in those two subgroups of patients. And this is what we found for detection thresholds. As you can see here, in orange and in red are the patients with negative and positive neurodynamic tests. And you can see that they have significant difficulties feeling cold and warm, so again proves the small fiber problem. They also had problems feeling light touch. Interestingly, though, I would like to highlight warm detection. And that is the only parameter that differentiated those patients with negative neurodynamic tests from those with positive neurodynamic tests. But have a look which direction it actually goes. Counterintuitively, it is actually those patients with a negative neurodynamic test that have more difficulties feeling the warm sensation. So that means that patients with negative neurodynamic tests in our study had a more severe dysfunction of their small fiber population. And that is really quite puzzling. And at the moment, it remains speculative, but we believe that this is true simply because we are not the only ones that report that. There's an elegant study by Boyd that has been published in patients with diabetic polyneuropathies, and he finds a very similar pattern. The patients with severe diabetic polyneuropathy are less neurally mechanosensitive. Now, a potential explanation, as I said, this is purely speculative at the moment, could be the nerve inner worm. We commonly accept that mechanosensitivity is in part mediated by this nerve inner worm. So if it is indeed that these small fibers degenerate in our patients with entrapment neuropathies, it might well be that these patients become less mechanosensitive if they have a more significant degeneration of these small fibers. What does it mean for clinics? For clinics, it means that we should never interpret the neurodynamic tests in isolation, because it is not a test that has a good enough clinometric property to detect, for example, carpal tunnel syndrome or cervical radiculopathy. But we should always interpret it in the context of the neurological examination. And specifically, again, it seems that it is important that we test the small fiber population to interpret these tests properly.